There's a common quality that all of us share, everyone here today. It's something that I've used to make a living. It's something that my parents have used to raise 3 kids while working full-time jobs. It's something that you might use to plan your class schedule or your future, or even a spring break trip. The thing that I'm talking about is creativity. Creativity is a very difficult word to define. I think in part because it has such personal meaning for each of us individually. Creativity is this mix of excitement and fear and vulnerability and just the awesomeness of putting new ideas out into the world. An interesting thing about creativity is that it's only been a part of the English language for about 90 years. So since this time in about 1926, we've seen a big shift in the United States especially from this culture of industrialization moving to a culture focused on creativity and driving this type of change. And we've really seen this type of approach taking form in organizations across the US and across the world. If we sort of frame this concept of creativity and how companies are reacting to the market over time, we could look at a simple graph as we're plotting the market share that they have, the revenue they're creating over a period of time. And there's some really interesting trends that start to appear. The first is with the group that I like to call the mediocre and the slow. These are the organizations that were kings of their business for a certain period of time. They were becoming really comfortable with the business that they were able to operate. And over time, they lost that share because they lost sight of what was happening around them. 2 great examples would be Kodak and Blockbuster. I'm willing to bet that there's some people in this audience who aren't even familiar with these companies, or whoever purchased a roll of film from Kodak or rented a VHS from Blockbuster. What happened with these 2 organizations is they were on a very physical side of their business with film and VHS and DVDs, where at the same time this digital age was sort of taking place. So they lost that track of time between when they were moving from physical to digital and ended up losing a lot of their business. And this is not a trend that I'm making up. If you look at the Fortune 500 companies over the last 50 years, only 88% of these companies that existed on the Fortune 500 list 50 years ago no longer exist today. And this is a huge shift that's happening. And on the other side of this coin, you have groups that I like to call the innovative and fast type of companies. These are the ones that existed in a garage maybe just a few years ago and now have such a huge impact on the way that we operate our lives. Companies like Google, Apple, and Tesla. These companies are the ones that understand what's happening now and understand what could be happening in the future. And if you look at the space in between this, there's another group that exists that's not oftenly referred to. This is a group that I like to call creative and agile. These are companies like GE and IDEO. GE, for example, is one of the few companies that has remained on the Fortune 500 list over that 50-year span. And that's not by chance. That's the fact that they are able to understand what's going on in the market and sort of alter what they're doing and remain agile so they're producing something that makes sense for their customers. So they're doing this through something that I like to call, and some people refer to as intrapreneurship. And this sounds awfully familiar to entrepreneurship, and isn't a misspelling, I promise. Intrapreneurship is the idea of being an entrepreneur within an organization, whether that organization is one that's small, one that's really large, the university that you're here today. And the idea of intrapreneurship is really interesting because it encourages people to sort of innovate even though they are part of something much larger than themselves. And rather than give you a really specific definition of what intrapreneurship is, sometimes I find the best way to answer a question is to ask more questions. So I'd like to answer a few questions: why, who, what, and how about entrepreneurship and how it really fits into your lives and the lives of what's going on around the world. The first question of why, we've already sort of answered. It's to innovate and grow, especially from an organizational perspective. And when you think about this innovation and growth, who are the type of people that can do it? Most companies are split into different business segments or organizations. Things like finance, people who execute ideas, people who are idea people, creatives, people who are in the operations, finance, accounting, human resources. And if you're able to pull individuals from these different groups within a business and carve out some space within your organization where they can mingle their ideas together and they can start sharing some really interesting perspectives, you'll see some pretty cool things start to happen when these people are able to work together. And the idea here is not to pull out people and just separate them from the organization. The idea here is that you allow them to be cultural contributors rather than just being a part of the cultural fit of an organization. The cultural fit oftentimes continues the status quo, where cultural contribution allows you to sort of challenge the perspectives that you have. So when we think about who, it's important to focus on these cultural contributors within a specific organization, which now leaves the question of what do you want to focus on? This is something we call the innovation outcomes matrix. It's really the intersection of offerings and users, and in all reality is split between 3 different types of groups that are focused on different actions that you would have associated with innovation or change. Now, to put this in a frame that's a bit easier to understand, I want to use the example of the auto industry, something that all of us are fairly familiar with. If you look at this bottom corner with existing users and existing offerings, it's a type of innovation we like to call incremental. This would be something like the Ford EcoBoost. Ford has taken a vehicle that already exists and they improve the fuel efficiency of it so that they're able to still apply to the same users with the same type of offering. If you look at this next type of region, it's something we call evolutionary innovation or change. This would be similar to the Toyota Prius. It's something that is an evolution from a typical type of vehicle that splits fuel, gasoline, fuel, and electricity to power you is where you like to go. And this last area, the creation, which is usually the most interesting, the most exciting, is what we call revolutionary change. This would be something like the Tesla Model S, a completely another step forward, fully electric sports car. And if you think even beyond this part, you could look at something like self-driving vehicles, which completely shifts the paradigm of what it means to be in a car. So when we think about the what, it's these revolutionary and evolutionary ideas. These are the ideas that are hard. They are difficult to do, but they have the ability to really change the way that we look at the world and interact with it. And finally, this leaves the question of how. How do we do something like this? It sounds like a tough challenge to have. In the startup culture, especially with the entrepreneurial side, there's something called the lean startup model. It's focused around 3 main actions: building, measuring, and learning. And then going through this process again and again. And it's an iterative process. So that means until you have something that you really want to put out into the world, you continue to build, to measure, and to learn. To give you an example of this, I've spent the last 2 years working on a project where we went through the same process. I was one team member within this group of cultural contributors within a large global organization. And we were focused with taking this revolutionary idea within our business and launching it out into the world. And when we started, we took the project and just put it down on a piece of paper. We had an idea and we just drew it out. Took some Post-it notes, took a Sharpie marker, and just wrote it down. That was the first step for us. And this was our idea. This was our revolutionary idea. From here, we shared this with people. We got some measurements from this. We got the ability to see what their reactions were. And then we learned from these interactions, and that sort of educated the next version of the product that we were going to produce. So from here, we made it out of cardboard. So we took it from the paper and made it into something physical that you could touch. We put a touch screen inside of it, something very, very simple, so we could see then how people interacted with this idea that we first put on a piece of paper. And we measured some results from that, and we learned from it, and then we were able to build a physical version, which now we have 2 patents around and have launched into the market as a viable business. And this all started with an idea on a piece of paper that we were able to go through and answer this how of building, measuring, and learning, and then repeating this process over and over. So this is all great for organizations, but you're here today to learn something. And I would like to show you how this can apply to your daily life, whether you're a student, a professor, a nurse, a doctor, an engineer, in business, anyone here today. When you're thinking about creativity, which all of us have, trust me, and innovation, and you frame it in the sense of these questions, it's important to think about your why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why did you choose your major? Why did you choose your career? Why did you choose what you want to do with the rest of your life? Once you have a really strong why, a purpose, you're able to really answer the rest of these questions pretty easily. Which leaves the who, which is everyone here today. Everyone is capable of creativity and innovation, whether you're working at a small company or a large company. I don't want to leave you with the idea that you have to create the next Apple or create the next Google. Anyone who is working in any field is able to really take some interesting ideas and turn them into reality. And that leads us to what? Looking at these revolutionary and evolutionary ideas is incredibly important. They're very, very difficult to do, and oftentimes they'll come to us and we'll say, someone else can do that. But it's important to even just put down an idea. If you have something that seems interesting, put it down and start to build to measure, to learn, and you'll be really surprised at the type of results that you're able to see in the market and things that happen in your personal life and your professional life. And walking through this process, oftentimes you'll discover things that you didn't know existed when you first started. At IDEO, we have a really interesting mantra, which is don't get ready, get started. And the idea here is that rather than constantly asking yourself questions of how do we get started, what's the first meeting that we need to have, do I have the right type of notebook, jumping into a problem and getting your ideas down and sharing them with other people and getting feedback is the best way to drive your own reality. Thank you.